Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And BlueDragonFive.
And in honor of Veterans Day, we're going to be taking a look at Disney's most honored military hero, and that might come from an unlikely source. That's right, folks. Tonight we are talking about Donald Duck and his military career here on a special Veterans Day historical podcast. So, Dragon, as you might know, my friend, this is something that I've been wanting to do for at least 2 years now.
For a while, yeah.
This is actually kind of a, actually kind of a bucket list podcast of mine, if you will. Now, Dragon, as you might know, I'm a big Disney theme parks guy. Like like one of the cool things about Disney in general that I like is that I feel like a lot of people can be invested in the company in different ways. And I'm a park guy, Dragon. I'm a park guy. And that's my major when it comes to Disney history. That's definitely my major. But Dragon, if I were to have a minor in Disney history, I got to tell you, it would definitely be in in the more centered and more focused area of Disney during World War II. And I'll tell you why. It's because of a little DVD line called The Walt Disney Treasures. Do you remember these bad boys, Dragon?
Yep.
Good old the malt, right?
Yep, Leonard the Malt Bolton.
Yeah,
Leonard Malton, to quote Tim Curry from Freakazoid.
so Dragon, did you ever have any of them? Like, what's your history with the treasures?
No, I didn't have any of them. I had seen some of the shorts and a few of the introductions, but I've heard kind of the specialness of it all.
Yeah, sadly, I don't own many of them anymore. They kind of got lost in the shuffle when I moved briefly, but yeah, I back in the day, man, I used to collect these, and the very first one I had was on the front lines, which was, I believe, a Wave 4 release. And on the front lines, Dragon, this is where it all came to. This is where all my love of World War II history comes from, right here. Basically, disc one was all the cartoon art. Yes, excuse me, all the cartoon shorts made during the war. So a lot of stuff like this. A couple goofy shorts. We had stuff like that, stuff of that nature, where basically it was like kind of Disney cartoons made in the climate of the war, but not really, not really propaganda based, with a few exceptions. I mean, by all intents and purposes, every short that we're going to talk about here tonight has some element of propaganda in it. And then Disc 2, Dragon, which we might talk about in a future Veterans Day special. Disc 2 was all the meaty stuff. Disc 2 was all the big, like, the Chicken Littles and the victory through air power and how to build a tank and all the big the seven dwarf shilling war bonds and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I definitely think there's a time to talk about that, but tonight we're going to go through Donald Duck's military background. Now, Dragon, just to kind of set the stage, it's very simple how this all came about. The company wanted an everyman character to represent themselves during the war. They wanted to this was before the studio takeover by the military, although it was kind of both before and during in the timeline. Before the studio takeover by the military, they definitely wanted to get this off the ground. This whole idea of supporting the troops. This was basically Disney's involvement, and basically when the military took over the studio for that brief period of time, they allowed them to continue doing these shorts because these shorts were a great motivator for the public. And they were kind of like propaganda without being true propaganda, if you will. And then, but that's also when the military took over. That's also when we got a lot of a lot of the more infamous, outwardly, outwardly propaganda, like buy war bonds type stuff, and also the really interesting, the military training videos and stuff like that. It was a crazy time in the period in the company's history, Dragon. I'm trying my very best to not get too whittled down and focus on Donald. But specifically, like I said, they wanted an everyman, and they decided on Donald Duck because simply Donald Duck's his personality, like Mickey was way too. Mickey was way too wholesome to be on the front lines. Donald Duck was a character you could put on the front lines, put in those situations, have him bounce off the drill sergeants, play with his temper. And he was much more of a loose cannon than Mickey was. And that's why they really went with him. And he really, I feel like this is kind of the period in Donald Duck's history, and we'll definitely get into this, that really solidified him, man. I mean, this is the glue right here. This is kind of the stepping stones to the classic Donald that we all know now.
Yeah.
So basically, folks, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a look at the 8 shorts that Disney released on the Walt Disney Treasures line that star Donald Duck. I'm not sure if there's any more, Dragon. I don't think there are. I think this is it. I think this is the whole canon. Like I said, there's other shorts that Disney did, specifically a couple how-to episodes from the Goofy series. I believe there's a How to Be a Pilot is one of them, or How to Be a Sailor or something like that. But we're going to focus on Donald tonight. Dragon, what is your overall kind of thesis statement on this whole thing? Because I'm obviously kind of the big figurehead of this conversation, but I'm interested to get your take. And of course, the shorts that we saw. Let's just say, folks, really quick, Dragon, before you get into it, this might be one of the few podcasts we do that has to come with a content warning. That's not just for me dropping F-bombs randomly, because the first 4 shorts in this are fine. Like, they're pretty much wholesome family entertainment for the most part. But Dragon, I'm sure you'll agree with me that the last 4 shorts here are where we get really subversive, and where we're really going to have to, kind of toe the line of the conversation. I don't want to pull in any punches in the conversation. I don't want to sugarcoat anything that we see in the shorts. But there's definitely in all 4 of those shorts, it kind of gets progressively more and more intense. You know what I mean, Dragon?
Well, the last 3 are the ones that come to mind. The last 3 we have in I'm sorry, I was trying to think, because here's the weird thing.
And the old Army game too. I mean, that one has a pretty mind-blowing ending.
Let me rephrase. So let me put it to you this way. All right. When basically the order of which we have these constructed here, I feel is a little off, but we're going to go with it as is. I feel one of them isn't really one of the old wartime shorts, but by the same token, it's kind of made in that period, so it kind of fits. But it doesn't feel like there's a.
Are you talking about the one that we end on?
No, not the one we end. The one home defense. I'm talking about home defense.
Oh, okay, okay. We'll get into that one. We'll get into that one.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it has a place here, but just without getting into it, it's just I feel it's sort of. I think there's a continuity with every other one. Not counting the last one, obviously, but there's a continuity to every. There's a continuity. I feel there's somewhat of a continuity to every one, with the exception of home defense, which again has a correlation, but maybe not necessarily is in like the original, like kind of like as they're just churning them out,
Yeah, here's the thing, Dragon. Home defense does chronologically. It was chronologically released before the penultimate one, and then the penultimate one is actually the only one from 1944, and the last one we're going to cover is from 1943. But I think for obvious reasons, you can tell why I wanted to save the last one for last, because it's definitely the one that's not Donald Duck in the military per se. But with home defense, we'll get into it. We'll get into it because there is if anything, I could have saved home defense for last, because I feel like, chronologically, home defense wasn't the last Donald Duck military short, but it feels like, in terms of like, if you're going to put a canon timeline to the whole thing, this might be the last one.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm referring to mostly too, because it definitely feels like if there is a continuity, it definitely would be at the very end for reasons, but it's.
Mm-hmm. All right, but for now, Dragon, like I said, what do you think of the whole thing, just kind of in general, just this whole idea? Like, are you as fascinated by it as I am? This whole idea of Donald Duck being the one Disney character who's actively served in the military, and kind of the legacy behind that.
I'm a little let down by one element of it, but on the whole, I am intrigued by it. I do like a lot of it. I'm kind of let down we didn't do any naval stuff with Donald, which it seems like a no brainer. But because I've never really explored all the. Again, I've seen the last one, obviously, but I never really have watched these wartime shorts before now. I gotta be honest.
He's like Han Solo, Dragon. He wants to be a pilot.
That's the thing, and again, there's a good story there, but it's a shame that none of them really got into that. I mean, one of them vaguely correlates to like him on the water, but aside from that, there's nothing with Donald being the sailor, which again seemed like such a no-brainer. Of okay, he's in Donald as part of the Navy, because every time you keep bringing up Donald's service record, I blindly assumed okay, it's a naval record. Of course, it would be.
Yeah, and honestly, Dragon, I'm glad you're bringing this up because for the life of me, trust me, I tried to find a good answer for this and I couldn't. I think it's more the fact that like if he was in honestly, Dragon, I think it kind of boils down to the fact that like just being generally in the army kind of afforded more story opportunities to work with. Obviously, a big part of that, as we'll get into, is his dynamic with Pete, which maybe could have been replicated with the Navy, but the whole idea of like the sergeant, that's all very army based. You know what I mean? And I feel like, go ahead.
Well, yeah. See, the fact of the matter is, you're right about that, Tegan. That you get more story opportunity from the Army because the Navy, without generalizing as much as I can help here, I mean, the Navy on the whole is more of it's a lot of procedure, and the Army is where you get into kind of the buck privates comedy. Where
exactly,
they're basically all the Pete and Donald stuff through all of these is identical to Buck Privates, which is not a bad thing because I love Buck Privates. The Abbott and Costello films they did during the wartime, where Lou Costello basically Bud and Lou enlist in the army, and Bud gets I believe they get drafted or they get called in, I forget if sometimes they volunteer because they've done various forms of this, but the official Buck Privates movies I can't exactly recall because they always do this stupid thing in the Abbott and Costello, a number of the Abbott and Costello movies where they follow the love interest and the main draw is like on the sides, the B plot. Why are Abbott and Costello the B plot? Until years later we get to the monster movies. That's for years it's always like okay, there's a couple in love, and then there's Abbott and Costello doing their thing, and that's why I showed up to the
thing. All right.
Anyway, but yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, on the whole, I love kind of the Buck Privates flair to all the Donald stuff here, and I do agree the Everyman quality is. I really like Universal with that is where it's just kind of we took Disney's Everyman and it couldn't have been Mickey or it couldn't have been Goofy because Goofy would have reflected badly on us. And
yeah, like I said, there are a couple Goofy shorts with the military, but it's more like kind of broad. It's not like we don't get a full storyline out of it like we do with Donald.
I think I might have told you this once, but it's so funny, and I imagine maybe this was done with the Donald shorts possibly as well. That they use the propaganda shorts, the more ridiculous ones or the more silly ones, even Buck Privates especially. The rumors were, I don't know how verified this is, but it's always the old adage has been that like Buck Privates and these funnier kind of promotional things have been shown to the enemy that's how the American troops are. They are like Abbott and Costello.
Right.
Like, no joke. Like they basically show like these bumbling soldiers, and it would basically it worked kind of for both ways. So it's kind of that's how everyone got their last laugh in some form with the propaganda.
Yeah. All right. So, Dragon, let's see. You ready to just dive right into these things?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. So we start with Donald gets drafted. Dragon, I have a kind of a personal history with this one. When I first watched this one, I shouldn't say it's stupid, but this is like one of the more propaganda-y things in the whole 8 episodes we're going to get is right off the bat, right at the start with the Army's Not the Army Anymore song, which just, Dragon, this thing got stuck in my head for years, all right? Like, this thing is such an earworm to me. And then the funny thing is, like, lo and behold, it's been, like, going into adulthood. It's been, like, several years since I've even thought about this song, Dragon. And then I take up that position that I worked for about a year at the Walt Disney Family Museum. and they've got this whole wartime section, and that is actually one of my favorite sections in the whole museum, you know, for obvious reasons to me. And they have a loop going on, Dragon, of wartime shorts, and of course the Army's Not the Army Anymore song is part of that loop. So I'm like, oh no, there it is, it's in my head all over again.
Yeah, you know, before we get any further, we really got to mention this because this relates to all of this, Teak, and this is very important. Well, first off, we got to mention the name too. I think we glaze everything. Donald gets drafted.
Donald gets drafted, yeah.
Yeah, Donald gets drafted. Now, all of these, to my knowledge, I'm not sure about the last one, but I think all the original ones that we're going to be talking about here, basically again, Homefront, and the last one I'm not entirely sure about, but the writer on all of these, at least one of the writers in all of these, was Carl Banks. Now, do you know the thing about Carl Banks I'm about to bring up here?
Yeah, I know it, but why don't you tell it to the audience?
All right, see, folks, the main writer on all these was a guy by the name of Carl Banks. Now, Carl Banks was a pacifist. Basically, he was the one kind of celebrating that. You know, after World War One, really, it's like basically, you know, we shouldn't glamorize, you know, sending people off to war in a happy-go-lucky manner if they're going to get slaughtered. There's going to be a lot of wanton violence, so maybe we shouldn't advertise that.
Which
So,
is essentially what that Army's Not the Army Anymore song is kind of satirizing.
exactly, and especially this one, especially, but even throughout a number of the other ones, that's the overall tone of a lot of these, if not the entirety. Is that Carl Banks is saying he's using Donald as a way of again taking the everyman and showing that, you know, war is not good. You're signing up for a number of things, and again, we're satirizing a lot of the usual, like, you know, it's not all just blood and honor in a way. You know, there's a lot more. You know, there are a lot more shades to it. Not everything's not everything's all roses and pie. You know, there's going to be a lot of again, it's not a glamorous work, which makes it all the more, you know, kind of all the more kind of the toughest of the quote Scrooge McDuck, that only the toughest of the toughies can make it through war.
Right, and one of the things about, you know, kind of approaching these shorts in sort of a loose continuity is that each of the different shorts is essentially a different element of life in the military.
Exactly, and there's kind of a great overall build with each of these, where you have again Donald's first day, and of course gets to kind of his big moment of truth, essentially, in the main story of it all. But yes, I mean the point is there's a lot of great satire on a number of things in Donald Gets Drafted. So we have satire on selling the war with all. Like, one of my favorite parts of this first one is all the posters that kind of advertise, you know, everyone deep down wants to be a war hero. So you go for, you know, kind of like your country needs you, and you know the girls, and again, just you want to.
You've got kind of like a very like Rogers and Hammerstein South Pacific vibe to it.
Yeah. And again, I like that. Again, it just like Carl Banks, he's not saying anything negative about enlisting. What he's kind of saying again is, and I think even years later, again, I think Donald Gets Drafted still, again, there's a smart commentary there, but it's not one side. I do think the message that's conveyed is that's not a bad thing, how they're selling the war necessarily, how they're selling the kind of the propaganda of, hey, enlist, but you should understand the sacrifice of the job before enlisting. That's the main thing. I think that's the learning. Again, you see your cartoon character go in there, and he's all these shenanigans, all this stuff happens to him. Again, looking like, oh boy, it must be, you know, you don't want to enlist. Like, no, it's not. You don't want to enlist. But if you go in blindly and you're not prepared for it, you're going to have Donald's experience. So, you know, all of that's really well kind of in the DNA of it all, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So we have they have that fun. They have the fun physical scene where Donald's getting his physical, and the uniform gag is the one that cracks me up. Where they take his measurements and everything, and they put him in this giant uniform. What do they do to get to fit him, Tiki?
I'm sorry, Dragon. I'm kind of blanking on it.
They spray him with water to shrink it onto him. It's some clever animation. Basically, okay, let me tell you this. With all of these, the thing that really appealed to me most watching these shorts were the old animation tricks. You know, it's like seeing that kind of that war era, like the early Walt Disney era of like kind of logic to cartooning. Again, it's kind of Disney in sort of that. It's like it's sort of the closest that kind of Walt Disney gets to sort of like a Looney Tunes era. If you go to kind of like a real comedy based kind of early '40s Disney, it's kind of funny.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely get into that with some of the other ones that we have to talk about as well. The animation, you're right, it is very vibrant and it's very fluid, and it definitely impresses me that throughout this whole tumultuous time period, they weren't just cracking these out. You know what I mean? They were actually like putting some effort into this.
Yeah, I think the operative word for me through a lot of this is going to be clever. I think there's a lot of clever animation through all of this, like the little again, like kind of takes you back to the again. It's not specifically these guys, but it kind of takes you back to the days of the nine old men. Of like, there's animation at its strongest right there. That's top tier animation right there.
Well, I would actually say a more accurate reference point because it's on the mind because DuckTales just recently covered this is the Three Caballeros.
Ah, yes, the Three Caballeros. Yes.
Because the Three Caballeros is another movie where it's got a very similar animation style. Of course, it stars Donald, and it's made on that kind of like not quite theatrical budget.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways,
So anyway, so getting to the Buck Privates of
you
all, I
actually
guess.
excuse me, like in terms of like individual gags and stuff. Like I marathon these, like I cram these out like in an hour, in an hour 20-minute sitting. So they go together a little bit for me. So just like don't necessarily like call to me for individual gags. Like I binge this stuff, so I'm
Yeah.
terribly sorry. The details are, you know, I have like I have more kind of like the broad strokes.
Okay. So Pete, so we have so we basically the Buck Privates are always Pete. We learn is enlisting again. This is perfect casting. You rarely see Pete and Donald shake it up because usually it's Pete and Mickey or Pete and Goofy. Those are usually well again modernly there's Pete and Goofy, but classically it's Pete and Mickey. So again,
Uh,
it just feel
a few times we get that dynamic.
yeah. Man, I love just all the Buck Privates esque shenanigans here. Forgive me if I just keep turning that, but that's exactly what it is. Where you have it's a lot of drill instructor comedy where it's like he's just trying like he's throwing the rifle back at him. It's just being tossed around. In this case, we have Pete just kind of messing with Donald here. And again, what we're getting at in the greater commentary of it all here is that it's a critique on the drill instructor dynamic. Where if you watch Full Metal Jacket famously, if you watch the number of things where the drill instructors, all the drill sergeants, always yelling at the guys, always saying insulting things, always treating them like they're. It is for a reason, folks. It's not just because the guy's mean. He's trying to get you dialed into the harsh, crazy situations and everything, getting you like a fine tuned machine. But by the same token, there's always a little room for a little bit more niceties in the military. There's always a little bit of room for that. But I think that's kind of what they're saying here is, you know what, maybe we could dial it back just a smidge.
Well, it's interesting, Dragon, because I feel like Donald and Pete actually have this kind of this very loose arc that they go through in the course of the shorts.
They do have a great arc, yes. So with that, my favorite running gag, and this is like one that takes you back to the old days, Tiki, and I love this. I love the peeling the potatoes punishment because it's a classic, and it's just Tiki. My fear is that nowadays people forget the old peeling the potatoes was a punishment back in the day. I think now it's just. And this we brought it back because the last time I saw a peeling the potatoes gag was Hey Arnold during their Veterans Day special. Where Phil was peeling the potatoes, just
Right,
there.
right.
But I mean, yeah, it was the grunt work of the military. We're like, yeah, nothing better. You're just gonna peel the potatoes.
And nowadays it's like, oh, thank God I'm peeling the potatoes.
Exactly, it's a necessity. But back then it was like, yeah, it's a necessity, but you'll be a lot of ennui.
All
But
right.
yeah, like on the whole, just for this one, real clever message. It's fun, and again, there's still a pro-American wartime layer to it all. So again, it's not all cynical. It's not a cynical approach to it all. So again, it's rare that you'll find something that again can last to the day, but still have something new to say years later. I think that's what's really impressive about Donald Gets Drafted. It's one of my favorites out of these. I really liked it. I mean, I think it still stands up. I guess.
Okay, so the next one, also from 1942, is The Vanishing Private. And Dragon, I think this one might be the
Or
well known, just because it's like out of all of them, I feel like this one has the most broad comedy and like the least propaganda material, and it kind of like it stands alone as just a cartoon that just happens to be set in, in the army, and there's not really a lot of deep layers behind this one.
Yeah, this one's pretty just very straightforward. And again, I get a sense that this one, a number of these have somewhat of a PSA quality of like, okay, here's something that goes on in the military that we're kind of satirizing, or just kind of like showing through Donald Duck's perspective. In other cases, though, we're taking maybe that as a very minor jumping off point. Then we're just running wild. Like, we need to entertain the troops. Let's give them something funny that very vaguely correlates to what they're doing. And that's what this one is. Like this one's
So,
class. Yeah.
It have to do with, the fear of parachuting. Some of them have to do with the monotony of a march. Others have to do, we'll get into a very famous episode that has to talk about PTSD, Dragon. I have a lot to say about that one.
Yes.
But let's just have some fun with some invisible paint.
Exactly, that's what it is. It's kind of taking it's taking a very simple joke about camouflage. Like, I want this to not be visible, which of course should mean camouflage, but Donald interprets this as okay. He's got to make it vanish. Got to make it look like it's. I don't want to see this thing, and of course, Donald finds this experimental invisible paint that apparently the Army's developing, and they're very kind of cutting edge with this. And it's a lot of great, and it sounds so simple. It sounds like, oh, invisible animation, that's going to be so easy. It's really not, because invisible can be really cliche and really ill done in animation. Be really simple, like, okay, they're blue, or they're a dot, as the Rugrats wonderfully pointed out one episode. Right, yeah. Dotted line. You're a dotted line, you idiot. Everybody can see you. We're like Super Friends when they did invisibility. So invisibility can be really hackney and really cheap, or can be literally really cheap when you just don't animate anything. Just like acting. But what we're doing here with the animation, again, this is top tier invisible animation here, folks. They're getting it just right, because you're seeing the interaction behind things. You're seeing like footprints. You're seeing the flower petals. You're seeing, how do you make someone visible or communicate that they're around? And do it here. Like the mulberry bush. And this leads to one of my favorite things about this one, Tiki. So again, forgive me if I keep mentioning Abbott Costello, but this one's not Buck Privates related. This is the humor in this one reminds me so much. I guess like an old vaudevillian thing. Maybe it's not exactly Abbott Costello, but I mean, I've seen this in one of my favorite Abbott Costello movies. Abbott Costello Meet the Invisible Man does a gag like this, where it of course involves an invisible man, hence the comparison. And in doing that, you have a lot of like, did I just see what I thought? Someone saying to another person, like, I saw a guy who wasn't a guy. I saw someone who was no man. And there's a lot of that comedy. And this gag here remind me of some of my favorite stuff from that movie here, where like the psychiatrist there. Basically, someone sees the invisible man, they go crazy, and they have to go to the department psychiatrist. It's hysterical. And we do it here with the general walks by, and our sergeant is like holding flowers, going around the room.
And the general is priceless, honestly.
That's the thing. The general is hysterical in this, Tiki. Basically, he's like, "Oh, roll around the mulberry bush."
And of course, starts out like he's just like, "What the heck is wrong with this guy?" Like he's more pissed than anything else, and he doesn't even say a word. You can just see it in the animation in his face. But then, when Pete's just losing it, he becomes, he quickly switches from annoyed to concerned. You know what I mean? He's like, easy, man, take it easy.
That's where things get hysterical, when we see this waste of grenades, where Pete's completely off his rocker and he's throwing grenades, wasting good grenades that we need for that war, by the way. He's just throwing grenades, and then of course that basically just this.
Can we just count like a Disney character throwing a crap ton of grenades as just like one of the many things in these shorts that we would never see nowadays?
That's true. That's true. We would never. Grenades are very few and far between these days. Disney. We might have gotten one or two in Wreck-It Ralph, but that's about it. It's really the only grenades of recent year I can really think of. Anyway, yeah, but you're right, Tiki. It's just like, come on, man. It's you mean the little man you can't see, right? That guy. Of course, he says he's going with all these grants. Like, no, man, put it down. Of course, he blows everything up. And of course, the ending, and this is the thing you really got to give Vanishing Private, has a really great full circle comedy here. And it's a really smart joke it ends on, where Pete's in there, and of course, he sees Donald. He knows, like, come on, Tom, I ain't crazy. What do I? I'm not crazy either, and I'm not letting you out. That would be crazy. It all works out well. Donald gets the upper hand. Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
All right, next we got Sky Trooper.
Okay, so this is basically like kind of a direct sequel to Donald Gets Drafted, where we see Donald peeling the potatoes and Dragon. I love the emotion here on Donald, where he's genuinely like crying about the monotony of war and how he wants to be a pilot. And I don't know, Dragon. I gotta say, like, there's something about the Clarence Nash vocal performance here that you really do feel for Donald. Like I don't know. Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy, and that's something I really. Again, while it was disappointing not to see a Navy thing done at all, again, they probably want it to give him more opportunities. And again, the direct thing they're trying to really kind of breach with the propaganda is to kind of inspire the Army troops, right? Basically the basic the guys in basic training for the Army. That's really what they're aiming for. During so again, that's why it's basically we've already kind of talked about it. My point is, I do like that we see Donald with a dream because he, in the very beginning, he said he wanted to be a pilot. He wants to be a flyer, and again, we continue that here in a big way. And again, him not being able to fly, literally peeling the potato in the shape of a plane that can actually fly.
Right.
Like, oh, that's great, but you're right. There's a sadness and a heart to it where Donald's like crying and everything. He's getting real sad. Like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of heart there. And again, it's that recurring building arc of like Donald wants to fly more than anything, but again, he kind of wants to run before he can walk on this. And Pete here is trying to. He is training him. He's having some fun with him, but he's like, okay, you peel the rest of it.
A valuable lesson that Pete teaches Donald, by all intents and purposes.
He does. I mean, we have like a lot of fun training gags, like pin the tail on the aeroplane, which is it has no correlation with flying whatsoever, but it's
one of my favorite little things in this episode comes right at the beginning when Pete, just gives Donald a huge pile of potatoes and he's like, peel these and then you can fly. And Donald, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Dragon, I gotta tell you, man, that's motivation for you. You know what I mean? That's a good, like hard work pays off type of message.
one of the nice moments we do get with Pete. And again, it's a life lesson moment with Pete. Then we have like a hilarious, like really dark moment with Pete later on.
God.
Let's see. So then, basically, the paratrooper realization is quite hilarious. Where Donald basically gets kind of a crash course, and it's so hilarious that Donald it never occurred to him that you'd have to jump out of the plane. He just thinks he's being piloted to a different place. He doesn't think that he's jumping out of the plane. And I love like the other privates or the other Army guys. They're saying like, "Oh look, the newbie does thinks we're landing."
Dragon, I think that gag. This is an interesting thing I was kind of tracking. That gag is like, I want to say it might be the only time we see the other troops in all of the 8 episodes.
You're correct.
And they're kind of like these goofy, like anthropomorphic dog-like characters.
See, what we had done, I believe, in the Donald Gets Drafted, we saw the back of a guy's head. At the very least, we've seen the back of the heads, which looked human enough. But this is the first time we see him from the front. So yes, it's definitely the first time we just see him straight on as kind of like the dog hybrid thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the animation when Donald is trying, he's struggling to stay on the plane. He's grabbing like every possible piece of Pete that he can, and that's what you're talking about in terms of like the Looney Tunes-esque animation quality that some of these things have. You know what I mean? It's like it's so fluid. So many things are happening all at once.
Yeah. And here's the thing: I do think there's a PSA quality to this. As simple as it sounds, if you're going to fly, you really do need to be familiar with the parachute. You really do need to know that before even dreaming about being a pilot. You gotta be prepared with the ejector. You gotta know what that's like. I feel it's kind of a PSA for anyone like Donald. It's like if you just want to be a pilot, you're not really thinking of all the other stuff involved with that. Well, maybe you need to watch this.
And you also need to make sure you're not colorblind. Sorry, Paul Dano. I'm sorry.
Anyway, for the Little Miss Sunshine fans out there. Anyway, Steve Carell bummers aside. I love the hot potato gag as they're falling with the bomb. It's like they're holding again down grabbing all everything, which leads to this bomb. Like hot potato.
It almost kind of reminded me of like, duck season, rabbit season.
This reminds me of Lilo and Stitch where they did a hot potato gag with the plasma blaster.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
And of course, again, very appropriately, they're both stuck with potatoes in the end. So it's a very solid inning and good circular structure. So the first three are batting 100.
Sure, sure.
All right.
All right, now we get to episode, well, I shouldn't say episode, just the fourth
This
one.
episode in war.
Dragon, this is the first one from 1943 instead of 1942. This one is Fallout Fall In. I believe this is the first one where Pete is not in it, right?
Yeah, Pete is not in this. Real quick, someone has kindly pointed out to us, and I think this might jog your memory a little bit. Pink Pearl Apple in the comments here says that they saw in the 87 DuckTales, Donald was in the Navy and either peeling potatoes or cleaning, and distinctly remembers him peeling potatoes once or twice. So again, we probably have gleaned Donald in the Navy at some point. Again,
the first time you see Donald in DuckTales, he's in the military. So yeah, definitely, we definitely call back to at least some of the stuff that we see here.
so again, what I'd like to think is that Donald, we do see him later on paratrooping. So initially, it's just dawned on me now we do see him paratrooping later on because I'd like to think that this experience in Sky Trooper scared him off flying, and then after the war he would enlist in the Navy. That's kind of what I took it as. But I don't know, maybe
Dragon.
yeah, that's my headcanon, I guess.
All right.
All right, yeah. So again, Fallout Fallen. That's what we're talking about, right?
So this episode is, I'm sorry, I keep using the word episode and it's inappropriate. This short it's very much kind of like a PSA of like, yeah, life in the military is kind of tough, buddy. Like you're going to have sleepless nights and you're going to be cold and, you're going to have to fend for yourself.
Yep, we do have like a cute gag here and there of like him covering himself from the rain, and again, this one feels it's one of the only ones that feels kind of formulaic to me. I think the rest of them are kind of doing something kind of innovative or interesting, and this one just feels kind of like, all right, yeah, this one's like a cutesy PSA. But okay, yes, life in the military is hard. We get it. Okay.
Yeah, I would say this one's probably the weakest out of all of them.
This and one other, I'm not too. Again, I don't think any of them are bad. I just feel like this one's like a formula, and like this one's a script, and the other one's a formula, or vice versa. We'll get there. Okay. Like we see Daisy's photo here. Daisy has a little appearance in this, in the Daisy sent him like a forget me not photo, keep him warm on those lonely nights. And we do some food animation here. We have food animation with the steaks.
Gotta love Disney food animation.
I'm gonna blow your head cannon here. Okay, watch this. Okay, Pete.
All right.
Okay, so Pete loves steaks in Goofy Movie.
Oh God!
He grew to love the way they were made back in the war, and that's the way he makes them now.
I love
it. Okay. Little son, come here. Try.
Oh man, that's
made him just like in the army. Made and ready. Anyway.
All right.
So we have like this helmet animation here. Donald gets a bump on his head, and again, this is like a little bit of it's not a whole lot of mind blowing animation in this one, but this is like one bit that really stuck out to me where Donald bumps his head and like it creates like this almost like a bullet went through his helmet divot in, like a dent in the helmet, and he spins the helmet around and basically like he interlocks on the dent that was just made because usually we just glaze over that so often in cartoons with the lumps on the heads, and I like that kind of like fit into it all, so that was nice. Again, not a lot of substance, but good animation overall, I guess. Nothing amazing, but again, just going through the motions, like, hey, fall in, fall out. Hey, troops, you've seen a few of these. We got better ones that come, but we're kind of stretched a little thin here. Studio commandeered and all, or about to be commandeered and all.
No, I'm pretty sure in 1943 that was actually Dragon. That might actually make sense. I'm pretty sure the studio was commandeered in 1943. So this might be the first Donald Duck short that was officially made during that, studio interference takeover situation. So that actually makes sense why there's a little less meat on the bones than the first three.
All right, so let's see. I believe trying to think if this is one's the really impressive one. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, next on the docket is the Old Army game.
Dragon, this one might be my favorite.
This is a really good one. It's a mix of like again, it has like great comedy, great animation, but also it gets really, really dark.
It gets super dark. Like,
Yeah, have a ripcord at the end, which is fine, but still pretty dark.
um. So first of all, Dragon, I do very much like how the story. This is basically the culmination of the Pete and Donald arc throughout these.
Yes.
And I love that bit, like Donald sneaks out, the whole troop sneaks out, and uh I love that bit when Donald comes back and he crawls into bed with Pete. And just the animation on this is priceless. With Pete's face, he's just he's just smiling maniacally. We get that bit with the muscle. And then Pete's just like, "Yeah, we sure pulled one over on the Sarge, huh?"
But real quick, so this one, the Old Army game. Now, I could be wrong here completely, but my take on it was the Old Army game is sneaking off the base to do some fun stuff, then sneaking back into the base. That's the Old Army game in question.
That's the way I took it. Yeah.
And again, like basically, this is the most kind of Sergeant Bilko we get with Pete right here. This is the old like like the shenanigans going on, and you have like the boss coming, the sergeant coming by, and everyone like Ernie Bilko playing it cool. That's kind of what they're doing here. Like, oh, Sergeant, welcome. That sort of thing. But so again, Donald, there's a lot of great humor there. I do like that Pete for a mere moment he was really proud of his men. Like, yes, they're all sound asleep, and of course, he's, like for a moment he was all prideful and comfy and cozy, and then I was like, okay, well now I gotta read the riot act. I'm gonna scare them. So yeah, now it's just like again, it's like the kind of the most cat-like we have with it's vaguely cat-like with Pete here, where it's just kind of he's again bear in mind he is giant cat-like thing. Looking at him that way, I like that he's waiting and he's kind of predatory like that. He's just waiting in the bed like that, just to get just to kind of rush and it's the strike.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of great animation here. So I think this is probably this is the best animated of all of them. I'll say that much. This episode has the best. Now you got me doing it, darn it. This segment, this short has the best of the animation out of all of them, I believe.
Yeah, I can see that.
We have the shell games. We have the shell game where basically Donald dives under a crate, and there are two other crates, and he's switching around. What really is hilarious, and what really sets this out than the usual shell game, is that it goes on a little bit longer than you'd expect, and we have all of these. Donald is in plain view, and Pete just isn't picking up on it here. Where he's like Donald like pointing to it, and he's like literally lifts the crate up, and he sees him, and they doubles back, and of course he's gone. There's a lot of great humor there, but then. He chucks down over this razor wire, like this sharp fence.
Oh, this bit is so good, Dragon. Oh my god.
And the crate cuts in two, and Donald lands. And again, it's cartoon logic, so I think there's a built-in safety net, but we're just not thinking of it because of what follows here. Where Donald comes up and you expect, okay, he's just going to crawl out of the hole, but then he has like this moment where he looks down, and it's like, oh my god, where are my legs? Where's the lower half of my body? And, well, to be fair, Donald never had to go pants shopping anyway, so it's not really a big loss for him. But, no, seriously, he looks over, he's like, oh my god, my legs are gone. And he has, like, this little angel, like, of the lower half of his body, the halo and wings and everything, flying off. And then, again, this is where it gets sad. And again, it starts off silly here. I just love how this goes, Tiki. So it's so funny. It starts off so funny and so silly, where Donald, Pete comes by, and says, "Okay, Private, you have to read the riot act," and then he realizes, well, where's the rest? Basically, he realizes that he doesn't have any legs. Now, of course, the dark thing that they're really referencing here, again, we're about to get into two really dark things referencing here. One, of course, is the kind of the old Lieutenant Dan move, where you lost your legs in the military, which is unfortunate. And of course, this leads to, again, it's really dark circumstances in itself. And they're like, oh my God, it's all my fault. You lost your legs. And they're both crying. And you have a sense that
perfect way to cap off the Pete dynamic with Donald. It's like, I don't know if they planned on this being the last time Pete shows up in these things or not, but it seems like such a great way to cap it all off.
And then, so again, here's the thing that really impresses me about this, Tegan, just to get into the big meat and potatoes of it all, is that I love that there's a built-in safety net. If it's a cartoon, therefore he cannot lose his legs. So you, the audience member, are assured of that. But, so you're seeing him crying, and I'm laughing at, oh boy, it's going to be funny when he climbs out of the hole. And then they take it the next step further. See, Donald glimpses Pete's rifle, his handgun.
Oh God, yeah, this shocked me.
This is like, even if you have an idea of what's coming on, you don't expect this. And I was in that category. Yeah. I didn't expect.
I mean, you want to chalk up like things you would never see in Disney nowadays.
Donald grabs a handgun. Of course, they would never. First of all, they never do this because it's very imitatable. Second of all, they wouldn't do this because it's Donald Duck. Third of all, they wouldn't do this. So the point is, there's a number of reasons why they would never go for this. And I guess like the fifth reason on that very long list is, of course, we're dancing around suicide and a little bit of PTSD with all of this. It's all very dark subject because Donald basically holds the gun to his head, again, very imitatable for a beloved American icon. And so again, he's going for the gun from a soldier too, which is even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And again, here's the fact. It's not just the fact of like he's contemplating it and he's afraid to do it, and he's moving the head away from the gun and everything. And again, then Pete catches wind of this, and Pete's not necessarily stopping him. This is where it gets even more twisted. He's not even stopping him.
Right. Yeah. It's man.
Pete's whimpering because again, basically what they're saying here, not so many words. And it's so
yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
Like, no, but I love this. He's so whimpering. He's like, no, don't do it in front of me. Do it behind the bushes.
Oh man,
it's so dark. Saying, yeah, if I were in your position, I wouldn't stop you either. Just like don't traumatize me, man. Go do it over there. Really dark stuff if you think about it. But so Donnelly's climbing against. Here's the idea that people won't even help him until the bushes stop. It's the climb the crawl his way over there and his own life, which is again sick and depraved when you think about it. But again, thankfully,
I feel like this is a very, very underreported dark moment for Disney. Like I totally forgot about this until I rewatched it.
Yeah, and again, I had no idea about it. So I think he's crawling his way. Then, of course, they pull the ripcord, the comedy ripcord, and this is something very. In comedy, you always need the comedy ripcord. You can go as dark as you can, so long as you have that ripcord. And they pull the ripcord, where we reveal Donald has his legs, everything's fine, and then of course Pete has the realization. Wait a minute. And of course, they're like Donald's really happy for his kissing his legs and everything. Then of course. Then of course they're running, and we have this ridiculous but just funny speed limit gag where they run past the sign. The speed limit's 35 miles per hour. Their cartoons running at very top speeds, and it's like 35 miles per hour. Now it's a very slow-mo chase. Chasing him with the bayonet. And basically the moral here is
physical gag at the end of that, right?
Yeah.
Something to kind of calm our nerves a little bit.
Exactly, and the main moral of all this, as dark as it, don't get me wrong, it's touching some topical stuff here. You can keep making, again, importantly, having those big moments of levity that kind of keep it balanced out somewhat. But the overall moral is very simple, and don't screw around, okay? When they're in the military, don't screw around, don't sneak off the base. And I like that it's made, again, this is made to make the troops laugh and to inspire them and just kind of, again, maybe get some people to enlist. It's made for a variety of reasons. And importantly, this says they have a sense of humor about themselves, saying, yeah, we know people sneak off the base. We don't want them to do that, but everybody is human. But let's just show you a reason why not to, okay? We're of course, in showing them why not to, it's like, maybe we'll traumatize them a little bit. Maybe that builds character. You never know. We're going into war, darn it. Might as well, let them walk the edge a little bit. Give it a balance. All right.
Right. So next one is home defense. And Dragon, yeah, this one, it's, this is where we kind of start to, honestly, Dragon, I would wager to say that the first 5 are all in continuity, and then after that, these next 3 are more just kind of like, wartime Donald Duck shorts that aren't necessarily in that kind of Donald versus Pete storyline.
Yeah, that's the thing, because that's the one we just talked about is the last time we see Pete, really.
Mhm.
But this home defense, here's the thing, it doesn't feel like wartime. And here's the thing, it's a very underreported thing. Essentially, it's the Dunkirk position of war, where it's like it's a civilian. It's civilian airplane spotting, where basically it's like you from home. You keep an eye out. You do like a little thing where you see if there are any like enemy planes coming by or such.
Which is, of course, very much in the style of what Disney was doing at the time with all the propaganda. Basically anything that you could do to serve your country during this time period, Disney was going to make a short out of it.
Yeah, this is the age old. This is an equivalent for the whole like recycling for the war effort. The whole like put a bolt in the barrel of your best guy's gun, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very much like recycle for the big. Don't get the Captain America membership. Use that tin to make a bullet. That sort of thing. Which
All
worked.
right,
I'm
now
not making that
Dragon.
up, folks. That was a real thing.
Now here's where I feel like this is kind of like this is where we need to talk about the theory. All right, we need to talk about the big theory.
All right, hit him.
So basically, I feel like the truth is going to lie somewhere in the middle here. But the big theory with Donald Duck is that because he was in the military and because he's triggered with PTSD, that's why he has the temper that he has. And here's the deal, Dragon. Like I said, I feel like the truth kind of lies somewhere in the middle. Um, but continuity wise, in my own kind of headcanon, I feel like this episode, god damn it, this short, uh, place, I feel like it takes place after Donald gets back from the military, and it's basically a commentary on PTSD. And so I feel like this episode, god damn it, I'm sorry. I got done talking about DuckTales.
And
um,
that's what you get.
this short, Dragon, this short is honestly probably the short that ties the most closely into that fan theory. And I feel like this short is the most evidence we have to support that fan theory. And I actually think it's pretty decent evidence because I feel like at the very least, I feel like the whole issue of PTSD was used as kind of like a way to this was kind of making light of the issue, and not in a negative way, just in the fact that it is a serious issue that of course many people who see war and who see military experience face. And this is kind of like making it a little bit more easy to cope with the symptoms, but still having some fun with it.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that.
Well, it's Huey doing. I mean, right from the very get go, it's Huey, Dewey, and Louie like kind of messing around with Donald, and I don't know, like they're like
No,
you're
no, no, no. No, I see your look. I see your point. I'm just saying I don't subscribe to it personally. Is what I'm saying. I see where you can get that from, but I mean, for a couple of reasons, I wouldn't subscribe to that. One, because we've seen Donald's temper in effect before the wartime stuff. Therefore, he's always had a temper. So that's what I'd go for first and foremost. But beyond that, I don't know. This just feels like again, it's Donald. I don't know. I just feel it's like again. It feels like a I'm not getting a lot of PTSD from this. I guess what I'm saying. I'm not really seeing a lot of evidence of PTSD within this. It's because he's very patriotic in this, and he's like ripping off the stripes and everything of the boys playing around. He's like, I think he's just taking it a little too seriously. I don't necessarily think it's PTSD.
like I said, I feel like it only works if you apply the headcanon that this is after he's gotten back from the military.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're
that's yep.
a little bit overly zealous about it.
I think that could work to a point, but then the only thing that throws me from that, Tiki, is the whole airplane spotting thing, where again that would only happen during the war, though.
Yeah, well, he could have been, he could have just served his tour during the war and then been discharged. I don't know.
All right.
I don't want to dwell on it too much.
Okay, so my yeah. Right.
Regardless, I don't necessarily think this is one of the stronger shorts. I think it's probably a pretty standard Huey, Dewey, and Louie affair of the time. Dragon, I imagine like the one that you said was pretty formulaic is this one, right?
Yeah, basically home defense I feel is the one that really doesn't belong with any of these, and then the only one that feels formulaic is Fallout Fall, and this one just feels like it's good. It has a very vague military connection. There's this very vague
Okay,
wartime.
well, to me, this one's the formulaic one because this one's like a bunch of other Huey, Dewey, and Louie shorts that we've seen. And there's not really a ton besides the loose military connection or the loose war connection that makes it stand out.
Well, yeah, as I'm saying, it feels like a Huey, Dewey, and Louie cartoon, which really wouldn't belong in these Donald Duck wartime things. Just feels like that's what I'm saying. It's doesn't
Also,
really again.
can we just point out just how far Huey, Dewey, and Louie have come? I mean, Dragon, say what you will about DuckTales. I know you've given it a chance. I know it's not really your cup of tea, but my God, like it's kind of shocking to see like we joke about the Huey, Dewey, and Louie of the 80s cartoon being like basically one character spread out over three personalities. But shit, at least they were color coded, man. Like these literally feel like clones. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I love how it's just like it's Clarence Nash doing like a slightly higher voice for Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
I mean, but again, this one I'm just really on. I mean, the only thing that really jumps out to me with this is one kind of the fun kind of Dunkirkian thing of it all. Like again, it's like serving from home and that whole kind of propaganda quality. But the main gag I like in the whole thing is all Donald taking it so seriously, like ripping off the ranks, taking the weapons, breaking them. Says, "You're a disgrace to the service. Go, go!" It's really awesome and dramatic. A moment there. I just feel like they kind of after that they don't really buy it back. It just feels like run of the mill. Like okay, it's just Donald just kind of making his own demise there, where it's just he's ticked off the wrong people, and now they're going to be getting back at him. He gets a little rivalry, loses his temper, what rinse and repeat. And it just feels like
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you.
well, of course, it's just like, yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times. That's the one thing Donald Duck as a character risks constantly. Again, see. Here's the thing: formula is not necessarily. It's not a dirty word. Okay, formula is not a dirty word, but it just feels like it's always great when we have something memorable attached to it. Here, I don't think there's enough of a memorable quality. Like Goofy, there's a whole number of it's the same. Like the whole Goofy how-to shorts are a patent. Like everyone loves the Goofy how-to shorts.
Mm-hmm.
It's an institution. It's like Denny's. It's a lot. It's.
I've never heard the how-to shorts compared to Denny's, but sure.
Sorry, the Santa Claus has been on my mind lately. But
that is seriously one of the best product placements I can remember in a movie. Talk about the Santa Claus.
No, but in all seriousness, it's just like again, like sometimes formulas work. Sometimes they're just like something you need something to spice them up or something to make them stand out amongst the crowd. And this is not one of those cases.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right.
Okay. So let's get to Commando Duck and Dragon. The one thing that I can say about this is it's kind of shocking to me that Leonard Maltin does not give a warning before this one on the DVD.
Did he give a warning for any of them, really?
Only to Fuhrer's face.
Was that I watched that thing. Was that little thing Walton to be at the top of it? Was it really that much of a warning, though?
Well, I mean, it was less of a warning and more kind of putting it into historical context at the very least.
I think it's just kind of a standing thing of, hey, historical context, because it's from the war, so, it's going to relate to war things and the propaganda of the war.
So, Commando Duck, okay,
let's just say it right now. It's the most offensive out of them all. It's just
yeah, it really is. I mean, However, Dragon, I feel like we need to put this into a historical context. It's very important to put this into a historical context, all right?
We weren't so nice to the Japanese back during the war. We were very angry and petulant, to say the least.
Yeah, but Dragon, let's just say, it's like, thank God, for the better, the relationship between the Japanese and the US is actually pretty decent right now.
Yeah,
Dragon, let's just say, like, when you look at the time period of this, when you look at the timeline of this, this one is the only one from 1944, right?
I believe so. Again, the idea is this is the last one of those produced during the war. Well, not again. Yeah, this should have been the last one chronologically for him. Yeah.
Okay, so think about it. This one's in 1944.
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor happens at the end of 1943.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that 2 + 2 = 4, right?
Exactly. That's the thing. I feel. Look, let's be honest here. Out of all the, we're definitely gonna get a glimpse of it with the next one we're talking about. But I feel out of all of the, all of the Axis powers that we were against back then, I feel the Japanese. That's the one we took. I think that's the one the U.S. took most personally because it was it was it caught us. It caught us by surprise, and I feel it brought about a lot of anger. Let me put it. Okay, let me jump into this a little bit. I'm going to save this more for the end, but I'll get into it a little bit here. Donald Duck is a really great representation of the angry everyman. Who he might screw up, might get in over his head, but he keeps getting up, and that's always the admirable quality about Donald Duck, and I think it's one of the main reasons he was chosen. And I feel that after Pearl Harbor, America was angry, and not just at the not just at the not just at the Japanese, the war as a whole, the Axis powers, but a little bit of themselves, for not either again for a variety of reasons. I'm not just going to nail it to one reason, but just to be like because they didn't see it coming, they blamed themselves for not seeing it coming, for not getting involved sooner in the war, for a number of reasons. And I feel just all of that anger at a number of things. Again, the Japanese kind of kicking that off. It really was directed towards the Japanese really harshly, as we see with this. But again, what I really want to draw attention to is I think that's why Donald was chosen. Another reason Donald was chosen. If you needed kind of the everyman who's going to get involved in the war, you need kind of a character who's known for his signature kind of style of anger. I don't know how intentional that is. It just feels kind of thematic and appropriate that Donald would be chosen for that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's an angry time. It's an angry time for the U.S. and we again Donald is the angry character that you still root for at the end of the day. Like we all have it. Almost everybody. I'm sorry. What am I saying? Everybody has a temper at some point. Everybody's got a temper. Everyone has a breaking point, and Donald's our guy for that. And again, there's a correlation there. But importantly, I think it's kind of nice is that we don't see war be personal for Donald. I think that's that was a smart move on their part. I have no idea how calculated, how intentional it is. I just think it just didn't enter their minds. Just used Donald as a device before they really went into like a full character. Because in regards to characterization, Donald wanted to fly, and that didn't work out for him. He's just kind of a guy flying by the seat of his pants, doing his best. Again, giving his all. And in doing that, what this whole thing is about, this is about the culmination of Donald kind of being the war hero he signed up to be. He was involved. He was able to paratroop. He got over his fear of jumping out of the plane. Mm-hmm. He paratroops to basically, essentially he's going to report on the Japanese camp. He's not even supposed to take him out or anything. He's supposed to report on he's get him a position, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Of course, he's warned about crocodiles and Japanese snipers. Of course, the Japanese snipers are specifically our antagonists for this short. And of course, Tiki and I were very familiar with Fleischer Superman. Of course, it was also during a time where there was a lot of unfriendly approximations of the Japanese people back then.
Yeah, I mean, just it's very much the stereotypical like kind of like English, like. It's not very flattering. It's not very tasteful. But like I said, this is literally like less than
its time, folks.
After up until that point, the nation's greatest tragedy in American history. So, I don't want to say there's reason to be angry. I mean, yeah, there was reason to be angry. It's like it's a very interesting time capsule, Dragon. That's what it is. You know what I mean? And that's why the wartime stuff with Disney fascinates me as much as it does. Is that everything that came out of the studio at this time, more than any other point in Disney history, was just kind of this amalgamation of just, the culture at the time. And, it really has its finger on the pulse of what we were feeling as a society. And like I said, freaking coming off of Pearl Harbor, it's,
I mean, you're shooting at the hip from anger after something like that.
I mean, obviously, you and I, we lived through 9/11. I feel like since I'm a little bit older, I have, I have a little bit more. That's a little bit more fresh in my head. But but just that was the first time. Like 9/11. Obviously, I don't want to like start like, oh, what was the bigger tragedy, 9/11 or obviously both terrible events. But Pearl Harbor was the first time that America had been directly attacked. You know what I mean? It was the first time that, America had been threatened. Like it wasn't the Civil War. It wasn't us fighting for the right to be a nation. It wasn't us fighting amongst ourselves. It was, it was a just
like attacked from an outside force that we could have prevented had we gotten involved sooner. Or again, debatably, I'm not going to get into a thing. I'm just saying that's what historically what's been said.
And so it's just putting yourself in that mindset historically. It's very interesting. That's all I'll say. I don't even really want to get into much detail of the short beyond it's Donald Duck taking out a bunch of Japanese snipers who are very offensive. But like I said, I think the best thing I can say about this short is that, yeah, we could certainly look at it now and say it's totally un-PC and it should be banned and whatever. But I think it's valuable in a historical and educational point of view, Dragon. I think stuff like that, this is really valuable to look back on.
The main thing I want to hit with that broadly is that, again, you gotta remember, it's Disney at a time where, it's kind of Disney not really, like, I feel like if Walt Disney were directly involved or like overseeing, and I mean, like if not Disney under the occupation, under like we have to crank out something to forward the war effort. I feel there would have been more tact, or there would have been like it wouldn't have gone to this place. Again, I feel like there's kind of like there's your arms behind your back on something like this, where you have to deliver a coda, and what are we have basically you're given a message and a prompt to make an animated cartoon about. And
exactly.
And again, to a lot of that, again, it's like it's not necessarily the Disney we kind of know and worship to an extent. It's just kind of like, again, they're doing the thing. It's like being asked by by the government to do something, and you're going to do it because you want to do what's asked of you. And again, during the sensitive time America, you absolutely want to do that. But again, by the same time, it's like you can't really question your orders, and that's kind of what we've seen with Donald Duck in these visions. You don't want to question authority that much. You just got to basically we're being told to. You follow what the drill instructor tells you, try not to screw it up, and bada bing, bada boom. And the thing I really want to say, aside from all of that, and we can get in like the whole bowing and apologizing thing, which is really that one really struck me. Like, oh my god, that was the first thing they start with. Like, oh my god, this is so not right. Wow. Like I didn't know. I knew we were gonna have some basically Mel. Like I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't know if Mel Blanc did the voices of the Japanese guy. I know he's done a very nothing against Mel Blanc. I'm saying again during the wartime effort they did arm behind his back. He had he did the. There's a name for it. I don't want to say it here, but the point is he did the kind of the Japanese.
Yeah.
And doing that, I'm just going to assume that it was him here too, because it sounded like him. And again, I imagine he did it for the war. If he might have done it for Disney as well as Warner's and anywhere else. So the point is, again, they're very much kind of doing a stereotype there with all of it. And I was thinking, just kind of awestruck, like, oh my god, like that's the first introduction to him. We're like two Japanese guys in. The sniper thing cracked me up though. Where they're dressed in these really ridiculous costumes. Again, they're trying to make fun of the then enemy. I do like how they're going broad with the visual, where you don't see anything uber offensive like we do in other animated shorts of the time. I do kind of like that. We did in this one at least. We don't see them because they're in like the tree and the rock costumes because they're snipers in disguise. As the environment, which is kind of hilarious. And I like Donald being unaware through a lot of this, where he thinks the gunfire from the snipers being fired is mosquitoes. And my favorite shot, my favorite bit of animation, the whole thing, Tiki, all of this, honestly, my favorite bit. I love the shells falling into his helmet, where like he ducks and like the shells go into like his helmet, and then they're around his neck, and he sees like, oh my god, where all these shells come from? And then it kind of grazes him between between his feathers, and it's like, oh my god, it's like that's really good animation that we would never see we would rarely see from Disney later.
Sure, sure.
All right, so of course I do like that thematically Donald is in water, giving them kind of the sailing setting a little bit. And this is the closest thing we get to Donald on the water in this, where he's on the raft, and of course we have this giant water balloon. That giant water balloon that fills
Water balloon gag is great.
this keeps again. He's like point all day. I love it when he puts corks on like the cactus plant or whatever it is. He puts on the sharp plant and he's just running around. And then of course it's like this giant like tidal wave of rocks. I don't know why it's not water at the start, but again it's this tidal wave of rocks before the water follows. And again, it's just in the end everything works out for itself here. Where it landed on the Japanese camps all because of Donald giving the runaround where he's being chased by this giant water balloon. So everything worked out in the end. And I guess the last thing we got to note with this before we get to kind of the big, kind of the big Oscar winner in the room. I'm not joking about that. Did win an Oscar.
Yeah.
There's a really brave bit at the end of this, where right before the rocks smash the thing, Donald he's basically at the end of the cliff. He's at the end of the ravine. Well, at the end of the cliff, the edge of it. And he's on the thing, turns like a seesaw thing that saves his life at the last second. But I do like that Donald, he has like this brave bit where he's going down with the ship, where he's like saluting, getting ready to meet his maker there. And it's like, again, like the message that's conveyed there is that he's saved for going down with dignity. And again, that's kind of, I kind of respect that and the propaganda, sure. Like if you're communicating the duty of a soldier is like, okay, you've done your job, you follow your orders, and if it looks like the end, well, that's going to happen to you. But again, he's kind of saved for his faithfulness to his cause and just seeing what they're aiming for on this. Again, I feel that's like the proper tack they took versus a lot of the other stuff in the shorts. I wanted to highlight
it. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about
it. So let's rewind back 1 year to Defer's face. And Dragon, I chose this one to end on for pretty obvious reasons. I mean, it's not a Donald Duck military short per se, but I feel like thematically it very much fits into the rest of these, at least on a loose level. And I mean, needless to say, if it weren't for the ending of this, it would be a much different short. But I feel like the ending of this is just so unapologetically patriotic that it really is just appropriate to end on that note.
It is, and I feel okay. So this one, out of all the wartime shorts, possibly all the ones for Disney, at the very least, for all the ones with Donald Duck we're talking about here today, this is the most iconic and most infamous out of context. Because this one, I'm sure, a lot of really unfair, infamous things about the Disney company. This one is this short is always used out of context in a really disrespectful way, and I always feel that's kind of wrong. So this one's widely known for a number of reasons.
You know what was interesting to me on a rewatch, though, Dragon, and I can see, I mean, you gotta admit, it's not a flattering look in modern times, obviously. But one of the things I was interested in was, I could have sworn, and this must just be faulty memory on my part, but I could have sworn there was something at the very beginning in this short that set up right off the bat that we were in a dream. And so when I rewatched this thing, and it's like, no, there's nothing to indicate the dream. It's just, it starts with that song, and then we just jump right into like, there's Donald with the, it's a freaking swastika on his bedpost. It's given the salutes. You know what I mean? It's like there's no setup, so I feel like that's kind of why it's a little bit jarring, is that it's like right off the bat, it's just, and obviously folks don't want to get political here, but I hate to say it, but we have to worry about fucking Nazis more than ever in today's society, and fuck Nazis, obviously. But it's one of those things where it's like, in today's society, it's even more sensitive now than it might even be back then, because there's such a taboo history behind it all. You know what I mean? There's just decades and decades worth of, this being a taboo subject matter, coupled with just the last couple years and, political stuff that I do not want to talk about right now. kind of reshaping the whole landscape of this conversation in a way.
Well, I've always hated I've always hated the old, the dumb rumors about Walt Disney as a person. And basically, whenever anyone would coin one of those rumors, they'd always use clips from this, and I always felt that's unfair.
The only thing about Walt Disney, like in a negative light, that I can confirm is that he was a hard ass boss.
That's the thing, right?
Negative.
Yeah. If Disney had a grudge against you just as a boss, just being unhappy with an employee, or if mainly the strike. That strike is when you saw the ugly side of Disney. Let's be frank. I mean, that's really the worst thing I could ever say about Walt Disney, from what I've come to understand. From years, from what I've come to understand, looking at, of course, various documentaries and such. Basically the war times when he turned against people during not the wartime, during the strike. Basically during the.
He also turned against people during the wartime, but that's an entirely different conversation.
I know, but that's what I'm getting at, though. Is just the whole during the strike is the whole McCarthyism and everything, all McCarthy hearings. And anyway, but my point is when people just make the age old the untrue rumors, it's like the frozen head thing and the other thing, which is what I'm aiming at here. Is they always discount the ending, where the ending basically makes everything right. And it's just using something really, really gutsy and really kind of, the thing won an Oscar for a reason. That this thing's. It's gutsy, conveys a really hard-hitting message. There's some humor there, but by the same token, it's a really smart way to produce an animated short that would convey propaganda, but also be entertaining, but by the same token be a little haunting. It kind of balances all those plates, spins all those plates. It gets away with it, but it kind of gets into this thing. I'll say this before we just talk about some of the finer things within the things, that I just feel it's doing a disservice to something if we're discounting it as an art form, or discounting it to the whole, or we're just taking these little snippets of oh my god, it's so shocking, right? You look at this thing, you look at down to with all these surrounded by swastikas and all this stuff. It just it looks so horrifying and un-American. Well, that's the point, dummy. Wait till the end. Watch it till the end. Right. You're dope. Anyway, so basically, looking at the actual short here, getting after all that political aside, getting back to this. So basically, what this thing does creatively is that we use the Donald Duck formula. Okay, Donald wakes up, and especially after something we've kind of gotten used to. Look, it's the classic stumbling, bumbling Donald Duck. He gets up and he's frustrated at the day job here. He wakes up. We're using the Donald Duck formula to wake America up to the Nazi threat and to inspire the troops and basically remind what they're fighting for, but also entertain the troops with oh boy, look at that Donald Duck fumbling and having a difficult time under the Nazi regime. Oh boy. And again, there is a biting humor attached to it there. I feel Mel Brooks would get a kick out of this. I feel he must have gotten a kick out of this.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mel Brooks self-proclaims his mission in life is to make fun of Adolf Hitler. It's what he lives for, and this thing is kind of all about that in a way.
But of course, the really interesting thing about this is that it kind of it shines a mirror where it's it shows the ridiculous side of living under the Nazi regime, but by the same point, in the same breath, almost, it's yeah, it's ridiculous, and we can kind of poke some fun at it, but it's freaking scary. And think what might happen if you were actually, if you actually had to live in that.
Yeah, here's the thing: we do this thing where we over exaggerate things to add that commentary to it. Where, importantly, especially if you've seen the other Donald Duck shorts that we talked about here. We've seen Donald go through a rough going, being in boot camp, being in training with the army and such. And here we see under the Nazi regime, it's even more tough and basically makes you long for the things that we did see Donald go through in the past.
Exactly,
oh boy. Exactly, I don't know if you remember this thing, because this is hysterical. I've seen Defer's face before, but it's been a while. I forgot the finer details like this that cracked me up, where his breakfast consists of the smell, a perfume that's the smell of bacon and eggs, and he's sawing this wooden stale bread. That's his breakfast, stale bread, and the smell of bacon and eggs. It's a Nazi regime, which is really dark in itself, but that's really funny. Again, conveys the point. Of course, his vacation, Donald goes on vacation. His vacation is literally just a backdrop of vacation. Then it's okay, break's over. And then we have what I like to call the Nazi pink elephant sequence, which that's when we crank things up to being scary.
Really really quick before we get to that, we get to the I think the most famous scene in the movie or in the short is the conveyor belt of the Hail Hitlers.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's used out of context specifically. That's the big one right there.
It's definitely used out of context, but by the same point, I feel like it's well done. I mean, comedically, we've talked a lot about like Looney Tunes style animation, but the way he's like struggling to get all the shells on the different size bullets, it is very well executed.
And I think the underlying message of that is if we take ourselves seriously, and even I think that it's kind of a way of trying to humanize the enemy a little bit, at least kind of take away from the humanity and the enemy's forced to. I'm going to be a little broad here, maybe to make it easier on the battlefield. I'm not sure. Again, if you take away the humanity of it, like there are guys just kind of doing their thing. Like again, the troops at home, like they'll have care packages to keep them company. They have loved ones. You write postcards and stuff over while you're in the army. All that's going on there. Meanwhile, on the other side, what we see here is again, it's a processed machines. Like they basically play their, they have we have the band, the very cartoony looking band, by the way. Remember, like all the really ridiculous looking Nazis playing the instruments.
Very much in terms of like stylized, much in the same way the Japanese characters were stylized in the last short.
Exactly. They're basically playing. We're going overboard like kind of an Oompa theme with them, which is just like, yeah, it's.
I gotta say though, like I still don't think that either of these depictions top the freaking Indians from Peter Pan.
It's been a while. Look, I know it's bad. I just don't know if it's that bad though. That's the thing.
Oh, it's that bad. It's that bad.
I remember. I remember. I'm gonna butcher her name. What's the daughter's name? The Indian Tiger Lily. Right. I just didn't want to botch that. Tiger Lily. Tiger Lily's father. I know what Tiger Lily's father is. He's kind of big, and I'm trying to think aside from Tiger Lily's father if it's really that.
Call him the Red Man, and he sings a song called "What Makes the Red Man Red."
I know the song is bad. All right, I get it. I'm trying to think from a design standpoint how bad the rest because again they have to the father you got to take with a grain of salt. I'm just trying to think of everything else though. Was it really that bad? It's been a while.
Trust me, I don't want to get into it, but that's a whole podcast unto itself.
Anyway, getting back to this though, but yes, with the point is like there's an over exaggeration in a lot of elements here again to maybe seem like I think it's playing off the stereotype of it's German made. It's very assembly line. It's very God, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very efficient in a way. It's efficient at the cost of the humanity and doing again it's like efficiency to a point of being lethal or being fatal, which is which again is maddening for any guy. Like again, if we take a beloved, and again they're still championing Donald's humanity and the everyman quality even under the Nazi regime. Again, to show the audience this is what it would be like under the Nazi regime, which is not too nice. Where again, you're going to be in over your head, like trying to keep up with all the rules, or else, or something bad's going to happen to you.
Right.
Again, importantly, we're keeping we don't sacrifice Donald's character and putting him in this situation. I think that's the thing that really, if they botch that, then this thing would not work at all. Again, if Donald isn't Donald, then you don't. Then the Fuhrer's face it's just horrible. It's horrifying, and it's shock value. It's saying something if it's like someone that we see ourselves in who's going through this, like, oh man, I don't want to go through this. And of course, then we get to the nightmare sequence that amplifies that to 11 with the what I call Nazi pink elephants.
Oh man, Dragon, if you want Donald Duck meets pink elephants, look no further than Three Caballeros.
Well, I know that, but I'm saying this is the Nazi version of it.
Yeah, you're right. You're not wrong. I'm just saying I rewatched Three Caballeros today because of something on DuckTales, and I still haven't recovered from it.
Did they work live action into that, Tiki?
Yes, they did.
Oh, really? Oh, it's delightful. No, I mean
into the DuckTales one. No, I'm sorry. Oh, man,
that would have been amazing if they did that, wouldn't it?
Their original plan was to do it, though. That was the original episode.
Oh, wow, what do you know? Okay, also, little details. I caught this on a rewatch. I just wanted to bring it up real quick. I love that Donald's hut looks like Hitler.
Oh, God.
See, it's like see, it has like the open windows, looks like the mustache, and then the shadow looks like the hair part of the one. It's kind of a little design thing I never noticed. For like, oh my god, it's Hitler's face, and as all the huts, as Donald's hut. That's ingenious.
Mhm.
Anyway, yeah, so a nightmarish sequence, and we also see like Donald as Hitler with the mustache, and like a little photo, which is really unsettling. And again, I'm sure taken
Oh
out of context.
yeah.
But of course, the big payoff of it all, which is the main thing we got to talk about, the big payoff is what saves the whole thing, along with Donald, is that it's a dream. It's key. The whole thing. If we do not show this as a dream, don't get me wrong. It's just shock value, but we have to double down the patriotism to balance it out and to kind of communicate the PSA of like Donald Duck basically saying like, oh, it's a good thing we don't live in a Nazi regime. Essentially, is what he's saying. And then something happened that I didn't. I
Line
think
like,
it.
and I yeah,
Oh, go on.
most unapologetic things in any Disney thing ever, and it's just straight up love tales like Donald, and he's got like flag bedspreads, and he's got like a little Statue of Liberty statuette, and he's like saluting the statuette, and he's just like, oh boy, am I glad to be a citizen of the United States of America.
So then after that, something happened that I kind of forgot. I read in something to it that I never read into it before. I saw I could see Hitler's like a cartoon of Hitler's face, and then we throw a tomato at it. But I didn't think of the symbolism behind that. I could be reading into this big time, but again, we're talking about propaganda shorts here, so I don't think reading into it would be unwelcome here. So, uh, the tomato is being thrown at an image of Hitler here, and it's a big red tomato, and I feel it's kind of a twofold thing. One, it's that Hitler, the big speech maker, famously, it's like, what if people, again, if deep down like we rejected this, and like as people should have, and they said, well, what if we threw rotten fruit at him, like threw rotten tomatoes and all sorts of stuff at him while he was giving a speech? That would have changed history right there if we actually threw the tomatoes when we could have. And I think the second more dark way of looking at it is that like we cover Hitler in red. And I think that's just broadening the message to America of like, hey, death to Hitler sort of thing. It's like, again, it's dark, but I'm saying I think that's kind of like the big. We end on like this giant red splattering of tomato, and that's kind of the last image you see. Is like, huh? I wonder if that's supposed to be like a kill Hitler thing. I don't know.
I didn't really pick up on that, Dragon, but you might have a point.
At the very least, I want the rotten fruit thing because that would just be good. Yeah, that really would might have been able to stop Hitler if just we didn't if they didn't cheer him on like that. If they threw some tomatoes at him, I don't know. All right.
All right. You know what, Dragon? We were gonna end off on this by kind of taking like a deeper look into Disney during the war, but honestly, I feel like we kind of naturally hit on that over the course of the discussion, like kind of like the more broad spectrum of what was going on in the studio during the time. Is there anything else you want to cover that we haven't got into yet?
Well, I mean, I got like kind of like a final thought sort of thing, but I mean, if that's
Fire into that, sure.
all right. Well, again, just to kind of recap a little bit what I've said before. Again, I think Donald was just the perfect choice because he represented that angry everyman at a very kind of sensitive time at the beginning of the war for the U.S. Again, he's a character beyond just kind of the anger side of it. I do love that. Again, he's just that he's the script who's in over his head, but he keeps on getting up no matter how many times like Donald Duck gets screwed over by life, or something goes wrong, or again he's peeling the potatoes for screwing up in the army, Buck Private style. Again, it couldn't have been Goofy, it couldn't have been Mickey. But Donald is as a character was well chosen because he's willing to fight for what he believes in and how the world should work. Again, the guy who's been screwed over by life in so many ways, shapes, and forms is the guy you want to succeed in the end. So again, Donald was the underdog. It was kind of the underdog of the Disney characters you want on the front lines. I guess I can sum it up with this sentence here: is that Donald Duck, and I mean this, Donald Duck was our best line of defense, and he got the job done. He did.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, like I said, Dragon, this whole ordeal, this whole trip that we've went on, it's one of the most fascinating elements of Disney history for me. It really is. I mean, regard fan theory or no fan theory, the fan theory at the end of the day is kind of like a small part of this at the end of the day, because I don't know, there's just something really compelling about the idea of a cartoon character doing his part and serving his role in much the same way that, you know, someone who would get enlisted into the military during this time period would be. And as you said, Dragon, you summed up the everyman qualities of Donald perfectly. You summed up why he was perfect for this role very well. Props to that. Yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, wartime Disney stuff is one of the most fascinating points in Disney history because it was the most compromised the studio had ever been outside of, like, you know, the strike, which went on around the same time period. I mean, there wasn't that much of a, I'd have to look up the exact dates, but there wasn't, I believe the strike was like right before the war. So,
well, remember, it's around Dumbo, so that's kind of the barometer for that sort of thing. When did Dumbo come out?
well, Dumbo came out like, Dumbo came out during the war. So,
Right. Well, oh, wait a minute. Wasn't Dumbo pushed off the cover for Pearl Harbor? Wasn't that when Dumbo came out?
yeah, 1943. Right. So the strike might have taken place like during the war. I don't know. Like I said, I should have looked up the dates on that. But regardless, it's one of the most compromised times that Disney had ever been in. And you know what? Even though the military themselves was taking over the studio, they didn't give up, and they still kind of stuck to this brand of quality that doesn't exactly relate to every propaganda piece that they pulled off during this time. But Dragon, we've talked about we've talked about Chicken Little before, and that's another one that very much a high quality piece of Disney animation with a message that just happens to contain some some propaganda vibes. But I don't know. It's just, to me, it really is fascinating the amount of material that came out of the studio during this time. The fact that a lot of it is still very socially relevant, at least from a historical context. And I just, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I'm glad we finally got the chance to talk about this because it's a really interesting cornerstone for me. It's like I said, if Disney parks are my major in Disney history, then Disney during World War II is definitely my minor. So thank you for a good conversation, Dragon, and happy Veterans Day to everyone, who might have family in the military. I know my cousin's in the military right now, so I salute him. And, for anyone else who's celebrating today, happy Veterans Day, and see you guys later.
Thank you for your service.
Oh boy, am I glad to be a citizen of the United States of America.